This is the Voice of Wichita Falls.
Welcome to the Voice of Wichita Falls, a brand new program airing on this Townsquare Media station and on our YouTube channels as well. And in the studio with me here for this inaugural program, and for quite a few in the future, I would suspect, is the president of the Wichita Falls Chamber of Commerce, Hendren Florsheim. Henry, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you here. It's a brand new program, as we said. Glad to have this on the air. I think it's a long time coming. The program is going to focus principally on the economy in Wichita Falls, the course that we're on as a community, economic growth, business growth, and development, things like that. And that's one of the reasons that Henry is here. Henry, for those that aren't familiar with who you are, I want to start with this. Let you introduce yourself, because a lot of people, you've been here for a while now, but a lot of people may not know who Hendren Florsheim is. So introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. So I've been in Wichita Falls 4.5 years or so. It was October of 13 when I first got here.
Yeah.
I've been working in economic development for almost 20 years. And my wife and I decided to move here. She's from Dallas, and so we were going to be close to her family. I'm a Louisiana guy, and it was an interesting move for me. But I noticed something in Wichita Falls when I came for the interview that it felt like we were on the verge of something good, that there were a lot of city leaders that were ready to take those next steps, whatever those were. I don't think we knew what they were at that time. And so something interesting happened, and that's what we're going to talk about today. When I got hired, and so this was probably back in September of 13, I posted on Facebook where I was moving. I said, hey, guys, I'm moving to Wichita Falls, Texas to run the Chamber of Commerce, and just giving my friends around the world a heads up. And we're talking about a pretty large group of people, and something really interesting happened. Of my friends that had even heard of Wichita Falls, there were only two things that they knew about it. And I always ask groups that I talk to, what do you think those two things were? And I'll hear answers like the drought, or we were recycling our poop water, or the tornadoes, and it wasn't any of those things. One was Shepherd Air Force Base.
Yeah.
And turns out a lot of my friends had either been stationed here, or their parents had been stationed here. And then the other was Hotter Than Hell. And I was really surprised to find out that quite a few of my friends had ridden in Hotter Than Hell. And these were people I didn't even know were cyclists. And so as I got to town, I'd just been thinking about that. It's like, okay, who is Wichita Falls? What's our reputation? What is the perception of the outside world? And so that's what I wanted to talk to you and the listening audience about today, is the image of Wichita Falls. So let's think about this for just a second.
All right.
Shepherd Air Force Base, undoubtedly a great asset, the largest employer in Wichita Falls and the entire region. The largest single economic impact in the entire region comes from Shepherd Air Force Base. And so we know the value there. And any community would give anything to attract a business that was going to provide that much of an economic impact. But let me ask you a question. If you're not at Shepherd or stationed there, or have a friend or family person stationed there or doing work there, is there a reason for you to come to Wichita Falls on a weekend because of Shepherd? There's not. Or a reason for you to move here because of Shepherd. All right, let's look at Hotter Than Hell. Great asset, right?
Right.
Biggest event that we've got, known around the world in the cycling community. When you mention Wichita Falls, any serious cyclist knows Wichita Falls.
Right.
But if you're not riding, or if it's not that weekend, does Hotter Than Hell give you any reason to come to Wichita Falls? Right? Does it give you a reason to move to Wichita Falls on its own? The answer is no. And so we're missing something in our image. If those two assets, and this is not to downplay those assets, they are huge to us.
Of course.
But if our sole reputation is built around two things that do not give the average person a reason to visit on the weekend, or a reason to move here, we're missing out. Okay? Think about other cities you go visit on the weekend, right? And some of them may be bigger cities like Oklahoma City or Fort Worth or whatever, but their reputation is built around things that you can go do there.
Right.
Sundance Square, Bricktown, for example. And so I've spent a lot of time over the last 4 years thinking about what should our image be? What story should we be telling the outside world and the locals here, right?
Right.
Because the locals have to embrace it before we can really sell an image outside. And so here's what I see. With all the efforts that have gone on the last 4 years and the things that are happening today and we hope and tend to continue happening in the future, check this out. So what if I told you about a city that was a really cool college town that had some amazing recreational opportunities, including the longest single-day endurance bike ride in the country. That was a military town and supported all of its military, including representatives from 13 or 14 other countries that are stationed here, some temporary, some permanent.
Right.
And that town had a great downtown with a really cool vibe that's got old architecture incorporated with new businesses, student housing, grown-up housing, and lots of jobs available there. That's a cool story to tell.
Right.
And that's the type of city that people would want to go visit. And so when we solely think of ourselves as a military town with a cool bike ride, and we don't think about those other assets we have and that we're developing, we're selling ourselves short. So just like everybody out there, to think about that for a minute when you talk to others about Wichita Falls.
Right.
The Circle Trail, for example, that's a great asset, and we need to finish it. We've got an opportunity to do that.
And we're close.
And
it's
we're
close to being done. Yeah.
And so when we finish it, I guarantee you people will come from out of town, because the ability to start at one spot on the trail and make the complete loop, the 26 or so mile loop, without having to reverse your course and go back over the same stuff you've seen already, that's really attractive to people. And not many cities have that. A lot of cities have trails, but a lot of times it's a one-way trail, and then you've got to backtrack and go over it. And so that's just an example.
Right.
All the stuff that's gone on downtown over the past couple of years and the big plans we're trying to put into place, that's what people want out of a city.
You spent a number of years in my wife's hometown of Lafayette, Louisiana.
That's right.
And I remember going to Lafayette back in the early 90s, and there were parts of downtown that were just Lafayette that were just dead.
It was empty.
They were
no
empty.
Doubt.
There was nothing going on there. And then fast forward about 15 years, and a lot of things really came alive down there. Do you see anything that in your experience there, in your years there, how many years were you in Lafayette?
I was in Lafayette for probably 15 years.
Okay. So during your time in Lafayette, and comparatively speaking, Lafayette is a little bit bigger than Wichita Falls, probably closer to Lubbock size in population. But do you see some things that happened there and things that were done there that could work here? I mean, because you had a similar situation. You had a downtown that had died and wasn't doing much of anything at all. And that's the same thing we were dealing with here in Wichita Falls. When I was growing up here in the 1970s and 80s, you could fire a cannon off down Scott Avenue and not hit anybody.
Sure.
It was that dead. Do you see anything happening that happened in your experiences in southern Louisiana that could also be a draw here as well?
I do, and let's start with the background so we can see the similarities there, too. So I moved to Lafayette in the mid-'90s, and they had just started a streetscape renovation program. There wasn't much going on down there, but a couple of businesses had just moved in that became cornerstones of their redevelopment. And one, believe it or not, in Cajun country, was a sushi restaurant. Well, so what had happened in Lafayette, the oil bust in the mid-'80s, right, dried up the town. This was one of those last one out, turn out the lights kind of deal.
I can see where a sushi store in Lafayette, Louisiana could get mistaken for a bait store.
Seriously. It's like, what, you got raw crawfish or something? And so you had that dynamic with the oil bust, but you had already had the mall go out, which used to be on the outskirts of town, just like Wichita Falls, just like hundreds of other cities around the country.
Yeah.
The malls would go on the outskirts because the land was cheaper out there.
Right.
And then businesses would follow. And a lot of downtowns used to have your Sears and Pennies and that sort of thing.
And we did here.
And that was the beginning of downtowns drying up. And then when the oil economy took a hit, that was the remaining part of the death blow for downtown.
Right.
So what Lafayette decided to do, they had a few local investors that decided to take risks on businesses, just open them up. We think there's a vision here and we can make this work. And we've had lots of that in Wichita Falls over the last few years. And the other part was the public investment. They invested big time on streetscapes, and they opened 3 parks and redid all the sidewalks and lighting and planted new trees and did all those things to develop that quality of place that you want. You don't want to go into a downtown district that looks run down, that has torn up sidewalks and trees that are grown up against the buildings and roots everywhere, and you're going to trip and doesn't feel safe to pedestrians, cars zooming by. And they fixed all those issues in Lafayette. And now it's one of the better downtowns in the South. It's a bigger community. Now, the city's only 120,000, but it's the hub of the Cajun country region, Acadiana, which is probably 600,000 people. Right. So it's a bigger area all around it, but the dynamics are still the same. The size of the downtown's not really any bigger than what we've got. Mm-hmm. And the assets they had downtown are about the same. You've got courthouses and bank buildings and some local restaurants and some housing on the outskirts. Yeah. And they just embraced it. And
well, I know when we go back down there to visit, we just park and get out and walk it and spend, a whole afternoon in downtown Lafayette.
Yeah, I did that last fall. I went down for an LSU game and I stayed in Lafayette Friday night to hang out with some friends. And I stayed at a hotel, not downtown, but I just Ubered downtown for Friday. And they've got an every Friday night a free festival called Downtown Alive, where you can go hear a local band and buy all sorts of food and drinks and stuff. And you can have a beverage in the streets. And it's just a really cool party atmosphere, but it's family friendly. Right. And that's what people want. You said you had this cool mix of college students and young professionals and families and retirees all enjoying this environment together. Right. And it's partly because it felt safe. It was clean. Right. You could tell the city is proud of that environment and they continue to invest in it. And that's how you do it. You get community buy-in. And I guarantee you had the same thing in Lafayette that you have here with some people, which is downtown's dead, move away, which is, it didn't work the last time we tried it. We don't need to do it. I've had people tell me, because we're looking for a new location somewhere downtown, a storefront type location. I've had people tell me, you should move over to Lawrence Road because that's where all the people are. And I'm like, well, the heart of the city is and always will be downtown. The problem we've had lately is the heart hasn't been healthy. But when visitors come here, they want to see downtown. Right. When an executive visits to consider relocating a business, they want to see downtown. There's no way around it. And so we can't just say downtown's dead, let's board it up and move out. There's been so much happen over the last few years that we're on the right path. We just got to give it a kickstart to really accelerate the process.
Well, let's talk a little bit about downtown. Obviously, that's a key component to the quality of life and improving the profile of Wichita Falls. Sure. Is improving downtown. And like you said, we've made a lot of strides in that direction. You've got the investment that Will Kelty has made in Big Blue and the building across the street. What is that?
The Petroleum Building. He's bought, I think, 6 different buildings now that he's working on.
Yeah, you talk about a gambler. I mean, this guy, he's taking a big gamble on Wichita Falls. He's betting that it's going to pay off and pay off big. Sure. It's a long-term investment. You don't go in there and buy a building and think in 6 months or a year you're going to flip it and make a fortune.
No, especially not a historic building.
Right. It doesn't work that way. It's a long-term investment, and he knows that, and his partners know that and whatnot. So, but let's talk about that. What are some of the assets downtown right now and some of the liabilities downtown?
Sure. Okay. The assets, more than anything else, are the locally owned businesses that people have embraced. And so when I got here, that was mostly Iron Horse and Casa Mañana. Right. There wasn't a whole lot else down there for people to go do on an everyday, every night basis. 8th Street Coffee is another one of those. But there wasn't a lot, okay? And so you didn't have options to walk around to multiple coffee shops and restaurants and bars and all those things. So think about the last couple of years, what we've added. And I know I'm going to miss some folks, and I'm sorry, but think about Highlander and I Duck Coffee and Half Pint Tap House and Little H Creative and Broken Tap, and help me out if you're thinking of others. Yeah. But Gypsy Kit's doing some amazing stuff, and Scratch just opened up a restaurant down there, and on and on and on. The Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame is there, and y'all now on Saturdays, on Friday afternoons and Saturdays, it's magical. It's what you want in a downtown, and it's what people want in a city. Now the liabilities, I'd say the number one liability is that we still haven't changed the attitude of a lot of people about why downtown's even important. Right. So as I'm going around town talking about the future of this community and now starting to talk about the 7 propositions on the May 5th ballot, obviously one of the things we're talking about is the impact several of those propositions would have on downtown. Right. Prop G with the streetscapes and Prop D with the municipal center and Prop the ones that will finish the trail and build a spur out to Shepherd would give more access to downtown to cyclists and so on and so on. I still have people telling me, well, we need to be focusing our resources all over the city, not just on downtown. And first I'll say we are. We've done economic development projects, and the city's done revitalization projects and road projects all over the city. Right. I can show that. Right. But secondly, going back to the fact that downtown is the heart of the city, and it's what people want when they decide on a place to live. Yeah, and so we've got to get there. And
I didn't want to get too heavy into the bond thing today. That's practically going to have to be its own show, completely separate, because there's
a month's worth of shows, 2 months worth of shows until March 5th, until May 5th.
There's so much there to talk about in those bond proposals. They wisely broke it up into 7 different proposals rather than trying to lump it all into one big proposal.
I agree.
I think that was smart to break it up into 7. And, one of the proposals, as you mentioned, affects downtown streetscapes. And that's the one that I have found, and the people that I've talked to about it, right now they seem to be either 100% behind it or 100% against it. No middle ground on that. Why do you think that is?
I think part of it goes back to the original streetscape program, okay? When somebody hears $1 million, and I've seen so many snide comments on Facebook about this $1 million star in the middle of the street, right?
Yeah.
No, the vast majority of that money went to rebuild the infrastructure underneath the street, right? Drainage and sewer and electrical conduits and all those sorts of things that we haven't touched in 50 years or 75 years.
Right.
The star might have, that might be 5 figures. I don't know, but it was not the majority of that.
It was icing on the cake.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the thing that the normal person wants. They want it to look pretty and consistent throughout the district, right? And so you need that. And frankly, those intersections look really good. Yeah. The one down by the farmers market is great. It really is, with the lamps and the nice sitting areas with the stars embossed on them, and it's a really cool environment. And so imagine that for 9 square blocks worth of that. That is an upgrade to this city.
Right.
But people still think of streetscapes as just pretty fluff, And so if you're just against government, if you're against any new taxes, any new government spending, that's an easy target, because you can say that doesn't do anything. And what people tell me is, well, we don't need that. Just bring jobs. Well, guess what? We've had an active economic development program in this community for 50 years. Yeah. And we've brought in some industry, and some industry has left, and that's the way that works. You can't control that. And frankly, we've got the same economic output from our manufacturers today as we had 40 years ago or so.
Yeah.
It's just that they modernize, and so they can do it with less employees. But the thing is, you can't just bring in jobs. You've got to have the quality of life to make this a city where people want to live. Our unemployment's 3% and change. Every one of our industrial manufacturers, I guarantee you, they're all struggling for employees. I can think of 200 jobs available right now today that our manufacturers can't fill because the people aren't there. And the reason is, it's hard for them to recruit people from outside, all right, because of some of these issues we're talking about and some others. And we haven't done enough to grow our own workforce. We've got to dig in and figure out, how do we develop more workers from our existing citizen base to go to work for our manufacturers too. Yeah. And that's the only 2 ways you can really grow your workforce. And so quality of life stuff, recreation and downtown development and all those pieces, those are economic development projects. They are not fluff, and we cannot emphasize that enough.
The new Career and Technology Center that the Wichita Falls ISD constructed, that opened up this last year, it's a key component to the job growth picture, because the hope is we train some of these young people, and then they stay here and they go fill some of these jobs that we're struggling to fill. That's part of the logic behind that.
Absolutely. That center is going to transform how we do workforce development in this community, and it does a few things for us. And by the way, guys, listening out there, it's not just for kids that aren't going to college. Okay, you've got 26 or so curriculum out there that students can start to take as early as 9th grade, and part of it is to help them identify if the thing they think they want to do is actually going to be right for them.
Yeah.
And so you've got your traditional trades represented out there, like welding and electrical and auto mechanic and body repair and culinary and cosmetology, but you've also got architecture and healthcare, and there's a data center out there you can learn to manage, and there's probably the nicest TV production studio out there, so you can learn audio visual production and graphic design and all these other things. So parents, think about it like this. If your kid wants to be an architect, they could go out to the CEC Center that you funded, that we decided we needed. And they could start as early as the 9th grade, learning how architecture works, learning the software programs, whether it's AutoCAD or whatever they're using. So think about it like this. Your freshman in college has been working for 4 years in architecture on a part-time basis in high school, learning the software, learning from architectural professionals. They go into an intro to architecture class as a freshman, and the classmate next to them has never seen AutoCAD before.
Yeah.
Who's going to be more prepared?
Right.
And so talk about preparing our kids for the future. That is going to be key. And then the other aspect that I'm really pumped about is that when the CEC Center was being designed, the leadership from the ISD came to the chamber and said, can you help us create some advisory committees for each one of these curriculum? And we did. We matched them up with our members that represented the various industries. And so those advisory committees not only help design curriculum, but they help design the facilities. Right. Think about it. A classroom for nursing has different needs than a classroom for a data center or for architecture, different furniture, different electrical needs. The outlets are in different places. Everything's different. And so those facilities were built, specially designed for that curriculum, and those advisory committees stay involved, and so they can actually get to know the students. For example, we took a group of manufacturers out there a few weeks ago, and one of the areas of interest, obviously, was the welding lab, and Gary Cunningham, the instructor out there, who was just fantastic.
Right.
And Gary just wants to know, what do you guys need? If we're teaching something that one company needs, but another one needs something else, well, tell me how you do that, and make those connections between the schools, which are continually strapped for cash, and these manufacturers that have such a high need for workforce. Well, maybe we can arrange some donations of materials and do some early stage internships, or have those manufacturers come to the lab to help Gary teach the kids how they do things. The more we can do to connect students to the business community, whether we're talking about high school or college, the more likely they are going to stay here. If a student if it's from here and they go wait tables, not that there's anything wrong with waiting tables, because I did it too, but they're not going to have that connection. And so one of the things we've got to do is build a more structured, continuous internship program to make those connections, and we're working on that right now. And so the CEC Center is going to be a key part of that.
As a lifetime resident of Wichita Falls, the thing that I see that really bothers me is how stagnant the population has been for so long. We were about 100,000 people 50 years ago, and we've been hovering between 100 and 105,000 ever since. We bounce around a little bit, but there's not a lot of movement. A lot of the changes happen because of Shepherd and whatnot, but we're pretty stagnant on growth. How big a factor is that for us? I mean, obviously we need to attract more people here to work. You said we got a 3% unemployment rate. We got all these jobs we can't fill. We're going to train a lot of young people through the Career and Technology Center, but that takes time to build up that supply of labor. So how big a problem is the stagnant population right now, honestly?
It's a huge problem, and some will say stagnant and some will say stable. And unfortunately, we've learned recently that neither are the case. So we're in the process of developing a new community-wide strategy for growth, a new economic development strategy. And we did a lot of research last fall to help give the steering committee an idea of where we are, and where we've been and where we're headed. Yeah. And unfortunately, when we look at the breakdown of age demographics, there's only one age bracket that's grown in Wichita Falls over the last 10 years, and I bet you could guess what it is.
Probably 18 to 34.
No, it's 55 and up.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Because it feels to me like there's more youth walking around the town now, or maybe it just looks that way to me.
You're just a cantankerous old man, and you're looking at these kids telling them to stay off your lawn, so you're noticing them.
I'm at the point now where if you're under 30, you're too young.
What we're seeing is that the mid-20s and under, we're losing population there.
Okay.
And so that's where the problem is, because our population may have remained stable or stagnant for the past few years, but if we're having our seniors, that group's growing, they got nowhere else to go. At some point, those numbers will start shrinking, and when they start shrinking, we're not going to have the people to replace them in the workforce.
And those aren't the people that are entering the workforce. Those aren't the people looking for a new job or a new career. So hence the problem filling all these new positions.
Exactly. And so
up,
our concern is that if we don't do something bold to change the trajectory of this community, that we'll be stagnant no more, that the population will start shrinking. And so bold steps include things, it's doing things either we haven't done before or we did a long time ago and maybe it didn't work. But guess what? Things have changed. People have changed. Interests have changed. And economic development has changed. Used to be a company would go wherever they went and people would follow them, right? Yeah. A big-time manufacturer would go in some little remote city and everybody would move there for that job. They don't do it anymore. People move to the city they want to live in, or they pick out that city first and then they go find a job there. Yeah. We all know people or our friends' kids or grandkids who have decided they were going to move to Austin or they were going to move to Dallas or someplace like that before they had a job. And they may have decided that and then look for a job from here. Some people move there and then go find a job. We can be that kind of city. We're never going to be Dallas or Austin. We don't want to be, but we can be a much better Wichita Falls in terms of attracting and keeping people. And a lot of that has to do with downtown and recreation and quality of life. Then the other piece is, and we're working on this too, is how do we support those that maybe don't have a career path laid out for them, but have an idea? And how do we do more to help people create jobs? Right. And, especially the creative types like inventors and tinkers and engineers that could come up with a prototype for something. Can we help them do that? And we got a plan in place that we're going to roll out in a month or so that actually addresses that. So, maybe you don't have a job coming out, but let's help you create your own.
All right. Henry Florsheim is our guest. He's with the Wichita Falls Chamber of Commerce. He's the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and Henry will be with us again next week. And we're going to talk about probably some of these bond issues. That topic will come up. Like I said, it's going to take us several shows to develop that because we've got a lot to cover in that, and a lot about the economic development and growth and the potential for prosperity for this city moving forward. Henry, if people have questions they want to ask you, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure. You guys can email me directly at henry@wichitafallschamber.com. or call the Chamber of Commerce at 940-723-2741.
All right. And I'm sure there are plenty of questions out there that people want answered and plenty of concerns that they have about this. And there's a lot of fear about, taxation and about where is this all going to put us in 5 years, 10 years? And one of the things that we hope to do with this program is address some of those fears and concerns and get some answers to some questions that maybe a lot of you've had for a long time and you just didn't know where to turn for the answer. Hopefully we're going to be able to address all of that. This is the Voice of Wichita Falls on this Townsquare Media station. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.